Welcome to Envizion More. Here, we dig deep into the insights of first-generation wealth builders, unearthing stories of passion, resilience, and relentless vision. Your host is Wayne Wagner Jr., founder of Visionary Wealth Management. So sit back and dig in. It's time to Envision More.
Hey, this is Wayne Wagner. Welcome to another edition of the Envision More podcast. Today we're getting serious. I don't know if we'll get tears today, but I'm here with my longtime co-host Trent Booth, and boy, this is the last couple of weeks here have been hard. We've had at the Visionary family, we've had a client pass away, and we don't have a lot of clients pass away. And then Trent in our kind of combined sphere, there's three other people who have passed real recently, very unexpectedly. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, between John Rulon and the Giftology group, John Rulon, 44-year-old father of four, husband, passes away suddenly, healthy guy, gone. And weren't expecting it. Hiking that morning, gone by the evening. And of course, Jonny and Matty Goudreaus, locally. In fact, the accident occurred literally steps away from your house, Wayne, in Salem County there. And it shook the entire hockey community. It's gone beyond hockey. It's, in South Jersey for sure. Calgary, they've got vigils going, and Columbus, where he played professional hockey for the NHL, shaking that up. An uncle of mine is diagnosed in April and he passes away in August. I mean, it's just, so there's, and wedding season. So I've been to 4 weddings this year, and you've got a big one coming up on October 12th, I thought we could have a podcast on life and the extremes, which is both the weddings, celebration of life, and then celebration of life where somebody's passed away. And can we just process that in the context of envisioning more? And how should this, how should this inform how we live now and how we live every day?
Yeah, we talk about envision more so much in terms of, passing ideas, worldview, wealth down to the next generation. But the fact of the matter is there's an endpoint for all of us. None of us does get out of this world alive, right? And I think you made a comment about Fight Club where, if you're given a long enough timeline, the survivability is 0. But the fact of the matter is,
die, and yet none of us see that as being imminent or relevant to a day-to-day. Right. Yeah. So that's where this is tricky, is the Superman syndrome of, people get cancer, but I probably won't get cancer. Like I heard the story of a professor saying, all right, raise your hand if you think you'll get cancer in your lifetime. Nobody's hand goes up because, but 1 in 3 of you, or might be 2 in 3 of you now,
right. Right.
It's going to be a thing. So it happens, but not to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, my 90-year-old mother-in-law is in the hospital right now with COVID. Talk to mom, in the context of her faith, there's no fear of where she's going or what she's doing. She's very, very confident what happens after death. Have a conversation about the process of death and getting from here to there. And that's a whole different conversation. A lot more fear enters and uncertainty enters the conversation and discussion. So it's, it's a serious conversation for the serious topic today, but let's talk through a few of these folks. I mean, I on my side, we were at I was at a funeral just yesterday. Great guy. And the rabbi at the funeral made this comment, said, we look to live our lives in such a way that when we're gone, we've left a positive dent where we were. And I think that's so true of all of us. I think that, in a world filled with social media, filled with standards of perfection we can't possibly attain, constant feelings of comparison or keeping up with the Joneses, the reality is we're not in competition against social media. We're not in competition against the world. We're in competition with ourselves yesterday, and just trying to be a little better, show up a little better, show up a little stronger, make a little bit bigger dent in a positive way on the people around us. Trent, let's talk though a little bit about, these guys. Johnny Rulon was, an icon. The giftology movement is global at this stage. John would be invited to speak in front of thousands of people. His books have been read by millions of people. And there's the way he lived. There's also a team that's in place. And this speaks to something that he had to build early on. He had to build sustainability. We go back to John Maxwell and leadership. Leadership, the measure of my leadership isn't, how the organization performs while I'm here. It's how the organization remains and thrives after I'm gone. And so for that organization, stand or fall, rise or fall, rise or fail at this stage. There's a team in place that's running that business at this stage. Yeah. And they're dealing with the pain and agony and stress of loss and the desire, fire in the belly to honor John's legacy by carrying on this mission of sharing the giftology message, right?
Yeah. Yeah. John wouldn't want us to stop living. He would want us to keep living, and wildly generously, like he lived, and one of the images that they shared at his celebration of life was God didn't take John away. He gave us the gift of John Rulon. There's a season we got John, and he lived so well. And at 44 is young, man. I'm still trying to reconcile that. Yeah, 4 daughters, I think about 15 and younger, young family, and wife, Lindsay. It's an unfathomable, but also at the same time, we're just not owed tomorrow. And that's a tricky thing to kind of reconcile is go out and do all the things. And part of Envizion More is live well. Like there is no time. So we've got urgency, but also finding that balance between making sure that I've said, I love you at the end of every conversation to make sure I've said, if there is air to clear, I'm not waiting for someday, because you just never know when a tragic accident, is going to be just around the corner there. So trying to work through all this, and a lot of us left asking the question, okay, so John's gone, we're still here. What are we supposed to do with that message? How are we supposed to live? How are we supposed to carry on and do the work? And I think I'm not alone when I believe that the giftology work isn't going away. That thing is here. And fortunately, a good friend of mine, Mike Monroe, is studied, and not just Mike, but a number of people have studied all the things around giftology, was able to extract that out of John Rulon's beautiful mind. He's got this great book that as he was writing it, I believe the understanding was, don't write it for the world, write it for your kids. Like that was the impetus behind writing this, is write the one that your kids would love to read.
Right.
And who knew that just, 8 to 10 years later, it would be, that manifesto that's there. But the work in that giftology book and the concept of giving without expectation.
Yeah.
Companies and individuals being able to be net givers and out giving one another and just being wildly generous to one another as a way to foster relationships and get that going. So there's just a lot of thoughts about, what do we do? What do we do now?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I just saw a reel from Gary Vaynerchuk. He's at one of his big events, and a guy stands up and says, hey, if I can do a backflip off the stage, would you give me a internship at VaynerMedia? And Gary says, first of all, no. Second of all, I'm going to give you the best advice you're going to get in the next decade right now, because what you just asked for, it was a double ask with no give. You asked to have the stage at my event, and you asked, if you do this cool thing, do a flip off the stage, that I give you something. That's a double ask with no benefit to me. And so you get 2 no's. And rethink, give without expectation, give without anticipation of personal benefit, give because you're wildly generous, and that's the person who you are. And that is completely consistent. That's pulled right from the pages of Giftology. That is pulled right from. So there's one of the biggest guys in social media, Gary Vaynerchuk, and the platform that he has, writing, pulling stuff right from Giftology and
Yeah.
living with that mission and mindset. So, I think we see, and that mission and vision of Giftology is permeating our society at this point. And I think it's amazing, when we live in a world where we live generously, when we
Mhm.
show up to just be net givers, and then the benefits that come back to us in unanticipated fashion. And we can call it karma, we can call it God, we can call it, the wisdom of the universe, we can call it whatever it is, casting your bread upon the waters, whatever. But when we live in that way, and that's the mission that John carried,
Mhm.
that's the purpose that Giftology envisions for the people that are interacting with it. So, and we're excited. John left the business in good hands, because
Outstanding. One of his business partners, Rod, and I'm going to mess up his last name. Everybody calls him Rod because it's not an easy last name, but really very much a silent business partner. But one of those guys that John quickly knew that he had blind spots. He's like, hey, administration, that's not where I'm great. Rod is apparently exceptional,
mm,
like
right,
so good at that piece of it. So fortunately, we can keep everything going, and there are some opportunities. So I think we're going to list in the liner notes here for those that are listening. If you wanted to get involved with rich relationships, which would be kind of understanding and even getting certified in some of that giftology methodology, if you will,
right,
that's certainly not only available. There's an invitation where every single company that I consult and coach, we're bringing in a piece of giftology already, and it's being
hmm,
celebrated because part of this is, again, giving without expectation. So he's talking about, don't send gifts at Christmas time. He's saying send it in September. Send it
right,
in September. Send it right now when they're not expecting it and with no ask, no
right.
strings attached. Just
That's right.
send them something
Yeah,
as and see what doesn't happen. So we've got clients that will send out uh shades, 96 shades. They'll send out like a gift card, no expectation. And
yeah,
this is a client that bought maybe solar, let's say 5, 6 years ago, and they get this gift card in the mail. They get to select the perfect pair of sunglasses. So it's a really generic gift that's super specific in its application. And they're calling or texting the person who sent it saying, dude, why did you send me these awesome sunglasses? This is
yeah,
amazing. They're like, nothing. I actually made a list of my top 10 favorite clients of all time, and you're one of my favorites. Thanks
yeah,
for being. What can I do for you is very often the question that they come back with. So we give without expectation. We didn't give the gift to get the leads, but you're gonna get leads because that's a crazy story. Now they're the barbecue going, dude. You know what happened with those solar panels up there? My sales guy sent me sunglasses 5 years after the fact. Didn't ask for anything. He said his thank you note. You need solar? You should call Mike. You should call Chris.
yeah,
Kind of cool how this
yeah,
giftology thing in practicality really does work and accelerates business. And in my mind, is super on brand with Envision More. I know you guys have done similar things, with Becky and
yep,
Becky Wagner doing excellent work with sending really cool, really specific gifts. It's not even about the amount of the gift; it's the
yeah.
specificity of that gift.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it can be now, the bottom line is when we show up to celebrate with clients, with customers, and we just show up in their lives to celebrate the moments with them or to mourn with them at a loss, or to you just mark a moment. And we do that in a meaningful way. I had a client years ago that he took over as CEO of a startup. He left big pharma, took over as CEO of a startup. I went online and I bought the biggest gift basket I could afford. Like it was like something that you're going to need two arms to get around, to like carry around. It was almost like a laundry basket size gift basket. I went to his office 5 months later, and the gift basket that had been thoroughly picked through, there was only like a third of the stuff, and it was meats and cheeses and crackers and cookies and all of the stuff. So the office had eaten like 80% of the stuff. They had the weird flavored nuts still sitting there and that kind
The
of stuff.
black licorice was left.
My handwritten note was still sitting in front on his credenza next to the basket. 5 months in the CEO's office. That's when you show up. And now I would have thought it would have sat there for a week or two while everybody picked through it. And look, we've all got a couple of things that are sitting around the office we just haven't gotten around to throwing out yet. But
Right, sure. Sure.
that when we can show up for a client and then they are proud to have what we gave them sitting front row center for them,
Yeah.
that's where that's the mission of Giftology. That's when we're hitting it right. That we're not just sending a gift card to a a
Right.
random place, or to a dinner gift card or a golf foursome or something like that.
Mhm.
It's something that's really specific to that person. So
Yeah. I mean, even that principle, I was golfing with a client up in Olean, New York, and noticed that he went to Michigan University, which is very different than Michigan State. And I figured that out because I got some good friends
yeah,
there.
right.
Right. They don't get along.
It's green versus
Um,
blue and
but
gold, right?
you got it. So
Yeah, yeah.
Michigan, right? So and when I went golfing with him that day, I noticed he didn't have a golf towel. So yeah, I go on Amazon. I think it was $15, but I sent him a Michigan golf towel. Now, the call I got from him, you'd have thought I sent him $1,000 gift. Like he was
Yeah.
over the moon. But again, it was the specificity. And I'm not trying to put myself on Front Street here so much as celebrate, that principle from John Rulon and from Giftology that I've never regretted
Yeah.
getting the gift and even being sometimes over the top ridiculous with that gift. His whole thing was surprise and delight.
Yeah.
Find ways to surprise and delight people and see what happens. And what a
Well,
what a way to live,
yeah.
man.
I've been a recipient of that from you and a group of guys, at my 50th birthday party. I'm not a big alcohol drinker. But I'd like to have a couple of top shelf things around so that when there's a win, or I don't I'm not a depressive drinker, so I don't go reaching for the bottle when when I'm
On the
depressed.
bad day,
So
win day.
I'll reach for the cookies and the cake in May,
There
but
you
I
go.
don't usually reach for the alcohol. But at our 50th at my 50th birthday party, which was a surprise party where we had 60 or 70 people for a dinner theater in our home, which was just absolutely amazing.
Blast. Yeah,
Um,
it's good.
which that was a gift in and of itself. But then you and a group of guys get together and buy me. I think it's Johnny Walker Blue Label.
Johnny Walker Blue 200-year anniversary. Yeah, it
Yep.
was one of those like,
So
dude, he would never buy this for himself. He could,
yeah,
but he
you're
would never.
right. I would I never would have. But
Right.
that bottle sits in my office on the window shelf, for big moments, and and it's got a little bit taken out of it.
Yeah.
And it's because that's a milestone moment, something I never would have bought for myself, something I wouldn't even have conceived for myself, that gives me a context to go, you know what? This was a good day. Today's a day for Johnny Walker Blue.
It's funny you
So
mentioned this because one of my buddies that was in on the gift knows you. He's like, dude, he doesn't even drink. Like, like he's not gonna know what this is. I'm like, his clients will. Those he drinks it with will know what that
yeah,
is. Funny enough, full circle. I turned 50, and of course, what does Team Wagner do? But they show up and hold my beer. We had to look up the special bottle that you got me. So I've learned with Wayne, don't try to one up Wayne. Don't try to outgive Wayne Wagner. I'll put it that way. You get humbled in that one. I'm like, all right, game over. New test. You win. All right. But what's interesting with that is, so here's another example. And again, I'm not trying to promote me in this scenario, but just I firsthand seen how awesome Giftology is. And this isn't a case where, I got business out of it or even a coaching client, but a friend through a friend bought tickets to go see Shane and Shane in concert, just one of the bands that I really like going to see. Great experience. He said, hey, we can go meet the band afterwards at the hotel. I'm like, it's kind of late. It's fine. Thank you, though. And I sent him $1,000 set of knives, a set of Cutco. And he gets this, and I didn't realize when I sent it to him that he got the notification that it was coming. It was an email that they sent him. I was like, all right, so there goes the surprise. But when he gets this, he's like, this is too generous. I said, no, you gift people stuff all the time. It's really hard for somebody to just repay that. And this is not about repaying it. This is about celebrating your kindness, your goodness to me. And this seems wildly appropriate, And again, didn't lead to business, and that's not why you do it, And it's funny because I reached back out to Rulon. I was like, hey, what do you do? He's like, a year later, send him another knife. That's what Rulon said. He's like, if they don't respond, he's like, send them more. Send them more. Send them more stuff. Send them more gifts. I'm like, man, That is a wild way to live. And, if we connect some of this back to Johnny Hockey for a second, Jonny Goudreau and Maddie, part of the reason why there's such a wild outpouring in not just the hockey community, but in South Jersey and up
Yeah.
in Canada, you're seeing this in Calgary and Columbus, um, is when he passed away, we had a picture of him and my son Jake when Jake was like 11,
Yeah.
and he just won the Hobie Baker Award. And we saw him walking around in Philadelphia at the Wells Fargo Center. He's there for the Frozen Four. Hey, Johnny, can we get a picture? Absolutely, was his response. And not just one. He's like, hey, can I take a picture of you two guys? And like, that's just the way that this guy showed up,
Yeah.
the way his
Yeah.
family raised him. And it was so cool to see just our picture, but hundreds of pictures of Jonny Goudreau with these kids that we could post because that's the way he showed up.
Yeah, there's been multiple Facebook posts on my feed of people from South Jersey who, with pictures of them, their kids with Johnny Hockey, and I mean, that accident literally was about a mile from where I'm standing at this moment. So there's a roadside shrine and just a country road, and like you said, these guys, this is the night before their sister's wedding. Their sister's getting married tomorrow. They have the rehearsal dinner, and then what do these two guys do? Do they go to Vegas? Do they go get in trouble somewhere? Are they drinking too much? No, they're out on a bike ride training for hockey season.
Training camp's a couple weeks away. I got to get on the bike tonight after the rehearsal, and that's where they were struck by a drunk driver, allegedly while riding and training. What I also do love and is equally painful there is that these are brothers that were always together. Off season, those guys hung out. They're down the shore, again, really generous with all of their friends because you're seeing like news pieces on their friends and how they're showing up. There's going to be a celebration of life at I think Gloucester Catholic tomorrow. I expect there will be thousands of people that show up for that.
Yeah.
And the family's like, hey, we appreciate your stories. And this is the same thing I heard, by the way, from the Rulon family as well. What do we need right now? We need your written stories. Please write them down while they're fresh for you.
Yeah.
Let us know how John Rulon impacted your life. Let us know how Matt Goudreau impacted your life. Let us know how Johnny Hockey impacted your life. That would be wonderful. It's interesting. I didn't know them personally. I met them on several occasions, but I didn't know them. But I'm flying to Calgary where I've got family still, and sure enough, Guy and his wife are on the plane, and they're going to go watch his son for a weekend. This is how close this family was. And I was saying, yeah, I'm going to fly to Pittsburgh for my son and meet him there. He's got a tournament this weekend. And Guy Goudreau was like, yeah, I remember those days. I mean, just how generous these guys were. I'm just some guy on a plane, and they made time for me in the way that they would connect with us like that. So just a wild thing just to see how when they live well, even if it's short, they lived well and generously and by those core values where they were just wildly sold out for people, and to see how they could show up for others, not just themselves,
Yeah, before we move on to maybe some bigger, questions of how then should we live, right? And in reflection on that, I know that there's a GoFundMe for Matt's family. It's Matt's wife is pregnant with their first child, right?
Expecting their first. And Matt had played at AHL level. I think had a handful of games at the NHL level as well. It's not like he had $1 million contracts or anything.
Yeah.
In fact, for love of the game, was coaching at Gloucester Catholic recently. So it switched to coaching at just 29 years of age. But what a beauty. But yeah, reportedly in just 48 hours raised over $500,000 on GoFundMe. So if anybody is interested in that, we'll put a link, I think, for
that. We'll put the link here in the
I think that'd be a great way
podcast notes. Yeah.
And again, nothing replaces having dad here, so no amount of money for either the Rulon family or for the Goudreau family brings those guys back. But it is a way that if we want to do something, beyond just the tangible, hey, how can we give? How can we support the family? There is, I think, carrying the legacy, the stories are wonderful, but also how we live. I think is important. And most of us won't have the fame that a Jonny Goudreau had, and be able to handle that so well. Remarkable. But there are, I think, some beats that we can pick up from both the Rulon example and the Goudreau example, but also, as you're talking about the funeral you were at yesterday, my stepmother, her grandmother passed away. Is 92 years old, but even if it's a kindness to have her go and not suffer anymore, it's still hard, right? So there's lessons that we can pick up in terms of how the living should continue to live if we're here.
Well, and that question, let's move on to that because that's a good segue, Trent. That question of how then should we live? I think there's some big a couple of big headline things. Number one, have a plan. And that's practical and
Yeah.
pragmatic. And
Yeah.
maybe dig a little deeper into that a little bit. I think number two, have a mission, like be living intentionally and on purpose,
Yeah.
be living by a set of values that you define yourself by, that others see in you.
Yeah.
And those can be aspirational. It's not a good mission statement, a good purpose statement, a
Mm.
set of core values to live by, always should have some level of aspiration in them that I have not yet arrived and somehow will not arrive this
Mm.
side of the grave. But it gives me a way of living, a way of showing up. So I think, talk through that a little bit.
Mm.
What are maybe one or two other areas that how then should we live when I ask that question, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, it's tricky. Part of it is just kind of make peace with our mortality. And I
Yeah.
say it because, Superman mentality is very much a thing, which is like, hey, people die, but I'm not going to die. Or,
Right.
hey, I know I'm going to die, but I got another 40 years, right? Almost like I'm entitled. I would say I'm functionally acting like I'm entitled to the next 50, 60 years. I'm
Yeah.
not. And we had an experience early with our oldest daughter. And again, it might sound morose for us to talk about the night she basically died.
Hmm.
And she was 10 years old. She had a grand mal seizure, the first of 5 that she would have that summer. And when we found her, she was non-responsive, not breathing, lips blue. Christy thought she was gone.
Hmm.
And I started doing daddy CPR in that moment. I don't know CPR, but I got her breathing, but she wouldn't wake up. So when I send her in the ambulance, I've got the other 2 kids here. We don't know if she's gone or not.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget doing that CPR and seeing visions for her future evaporate. Her
Right. Right.
graduation, her wedding, and there was a third, but like the idea of just those are gone. And as parents, we very often will not feel entitled, but we'll function like, hey, I've got forever with them and they're always going to be here and I'll outlive them. And that is not the case as Guy, puts Matt and Jonny, in the ground here
Hmm.
in this next week here. The idea that when we got Katie back, we were leaving the emergency room and there were other parents there that some of them weren't leaving with their kids.
Hmm.
And that never occurred to me before that could be a thing. As we had follow-up appointments at CHOP, as dire as our situation was, and it was, epilepsy does take lives every day. We had the type that she would only usually have it going in or out of REM sleep. So she had benign Rolandic epilepsy. The people at CHOP can't pump their tires enough. Amazing work over there. Tremendous to shepherd us through that whole experience. But as we're there, not only does she have the type of epilepsy that she could grow out of, and she did, she had the type of epilepsy where we could manage it with medication. They actually have medicine now that can suppress the seizure from hitting. And
Hmm.
they can do an EEG later and figure out, oh yeah, she avoided 4 seizures based on this medicine. Wow, what a time
Hmm.
to be alive. And there are some kids that no amount of medicine will prevent those seizures for them. So all of a sudden it
Right.
feels like we hit the lottery and we're lucky. We're
Yeah.
blessed, not cursed, put it that way. There's kids that are fighting cancer, brain cancer at CHOP. And we don't have that. So part of me is like, man, this is hard, but I would take our heart over their heart any day.
Hmm.
So the blessing of having seen Katie now graduate and how much more impressed upon us because we're not entitled, we're not owed tomorrow to celebrate her graduation. It was so much sweeter because we know we almost didn't get this, to
Yeah.
imagine a day where she's a mom, a day where she gets married, Lord willing, because again, we're not even owed that still, right? We're closer to that than ever. But again, what I'm driving at is that should inform how we live today. It should make us hug our loved ones a little closer. It should inspire us if there's a difficult conversation, or need to clear the air, or ask for forgiveness, or hey, my brother aren't seeing eye to eye. Don't wait. Don't
Yeah.
wait for that. Let's not burn time.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's short term and long term, right? So there's been twice in the last 6 months where Bryce and I have had situations that were, he's a growing young guy. He's making some decisions that I may not be in complete alignment with about how he's, engaging in certain activities and that kind of stuff. And so he'd come to me and say, I asked him about something. He gave me an answer. I didn't really believe the answer, but I don't have any evidence to the contrary. And he comes back to me later and says, "Hey, Dad, you know, I lied to you about this, and in fact, it is what you assumed, and and that kind of thing." And then I take, I say, "Okay, well, what caused you to feel the need to lie to me?" And, well, I was afraid of how you were going to respond, how you're going to react. And so that really breeds questions and reflectiveness on my end, because, hey, how have I showed up in the past that's leading him to expect a negative reaction now? B, when I don't show up the way in kind of maybe the fiery way that he thought I was,
Yeah.
I'm breeding credibility for our relationship in the future. And then C, when he comes back to me and says, "Hey, why didn't you respond maybe with some of the fire that I thought you were
Sure.
going to?" And I can say to him, "Because I want to be building life and pouring into you for the next 40 years,
Yeah.
or as long as God gives me breath.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to be able to have the credibility, to have the voice, to have the presence in your life, I have to make sure that we're building long bridges, not burning short ones."
Yeah. Yeah.
And and so let's not focus on the small things that would be small and could create great division between us now, and jeopardize our ability to build something magical, something neither of us can yet imagine
Yeah.
tomorrow, because of something that was really, we could have gotten past if only I hadn't shown up with
Mhm.
the fire,
Yeah.
or shown up, looking to torch, something, and stand and die on this hill.
Mm.
Right.
I've
So,
heard recently about the story of wanting to be a dad where if my kid was in trouble, instead of saying, "Don't tell my dad," or
mm,
don't arrest me, my dad can't find out about this. I want it to
yeah,
be, "Oh, I'm in trouble. I'm gonna call my dad."
that's
Like, I
right.
want to be that type of dad. So that's the relationship that we're kind of going for too. Is, hey, I'm
Absolutely.
not pretending I'll be super excited, wiping sleep from my eye if I pick you up from that party
Yeah. Yep.
because you called.
Yep.
Also, call me every single time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to come in and rescue you, and I don't want you driving out. You know,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you shouldn't be driving, I don't want you driving. I'll come get you, type of thing. And that shift, some of that also does again inform how we live today. Is it's again talking about funerals. I heard it referred to as the dash. So
Mm,
I'm born March 11, 1974. There's a dash before my expiration date,
yeah.
yet to be determined. But that dash is where that whole living, all the living is in that little dash.
Right.
And I'd like to think my dash isn't done yet, but I want to make sure if I'm here and John Rulon isn't, I've been given much. I've been given time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much is given, much is expected. So I want to make sure I'm living well and worthy. And can I pick up my little piece of the baton for giftology and live well? Can I
Yeah.
continue to manifest, Jonny and Maddie Goudreaus in their
Right.
relationship with their family and with the way they showed up for their sisters and the way they show up for each other? Can I foster that with our kids? Can I foster that with my wife? Can I make sure that we're living well?
Yeah.
Because they're not here, and honor that legacy.
I
That's
still
important.
I still believe the day is going to come, Trent, that you're walking through the Wells Fargo Center and somebody's going to go, "That's Trent Booth. Will you take a picture with me?"
Dude, I would
So
take pictures so
that
fast,
day's coming, brother.
showing up like that. I get it. If it is terrific, because I'd want to do well. I want to do well with a little so I could have a little more. But here's an interesting one. You mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk. One of the I think one of the last posts on social media that John Rulon put up was Gary Vaynerchuk talking about giftology and him. He
Mm,
was like, "Oh, how cool is this?" And I'm like, if you're Gary Vaynerchuk, you're learning about John Rulon going, how cool is this? The same idea where I've heard stories that Vaynerchuk has shared about, giving wild gifts. In fact, the short version is somebody bought just a little bit of Pinot Noir, a
yeah.
case, and he sent him like a signed jersey. I think it was
Right.
Jake Cutler in Chicago, and heard nothing from the guy, nothing for months. He's kind of like, oh, whatever, no big deal. Well, eventually, a guy is buying many cases of like expensive wine, Bordeaux or something, and turns out he was totally referred, by the guy.
Yeah.
It said something to the extent of like, by the way, I'm a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen, so it's
Right.
just kind of like open. You can also get other gifts. I don't know, but the idea of Vaynerchuk and having that giftology, whether he got that from John Rulon or they're just meshed up at the same time,
Yeah.
probably believe the former more than the latter. But in my mind, two thoughts occurred. One is, dude, it's too early to lose John.
Yeah.
Too early to lose
Yeah.
John Rulon. But on the other side of that, if I, based on my faith, believe that John's journey is done, I'm saying, well, what can we do to make sure that other people are hearing these stories, that we can keep these
Yeah.
things going, that his journey is complete. He's in glory. He's good. We're
Yeah.
sad. We miss him. But how do we make sure we keep that legacy going and keep those principles going?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that idea of living by a set of principles, having a message, having something. So it's there's people who die young and you go to the funeral and these people lived train wreck lives. And it's sad. It's a sad environment. There's genuine mourning and it's almost it's mourning without hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's somebody like a John Rulon or John and Matt Goudreaus and the stories that come out, the mission and passion and message that they live by, the ethos that they live by, that they shared, the bits of good that they left like breadcrumbs everywhere they went. And the core values they live by are something to absolutely be celebrated
Yeah.
and multiplied and compounded. And in some sense, God or the universe or karma gives us these moments, gave us the gift of John Rulon for a season, gave us the gift of John and Matt Goudreaus for a season, and then gives us this moment, not just to mourn, but also to magnify,
Right.
to take the good, to take the messaging, to take the ethos, to take the values and go out. And then how ought we also live to magnify those values in our own lives and leave a bigger dent. And it's almost it's the magnification principle of a magnifying glass, right? Where, you take all of this energy comes in on one end and then coming out the other side, man, there's so much more power that can come because of the magnification and we can see things bigger, we can see things more clearly, and there's so much more impact that can come from it. So this is good stuff. I think one of the other principles though is that idea of having a plan. And if I do drop dead tomorrow, so estate planners are a dying breed. No pun intended here, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot of people, a lot of newly minted lawyers going into estate planning, and yet there's 76 million baby boomers who are at the point or within 10 to 15 years
It's
of
imminent.
passing away. And
Yeah.
as a nation, we've never had fewer estate planning attorneys actually in practice,
Yeah.
and we've never had to bury more people than we have to in the next 15 years just
It's a
from a
foundation.
longevity perspective.
I mean, you think about how hard it is to lose your spouse, but what if you don't have their passwords? You don't know where the money's invested. You don't
Yeah.
know, what has been put together. We have no plan for the funeral, what I would want or wouldn't want.
Yeah.
We know there's some practical tools that we could refer to, even just in terms of, is there a checklist?
Yeah.
Because again, as hard as that moment is, I don't want to compound that by making it harder for my wife, for example,
Yeah.
to figure out,
Yeah.
how do I log into our bank accounts? How do I find our investments? Do I even
Yeah.
know what insurance policies exist, et cetera?
Yeah, we have list of things for clients to think through that we provide to clients and prospects. There's also a number of other companies out there that have provided I can't remember if it's Knockbox or something like that. There's a couple of other resources where they've got very thorough and they take it all and put it in like a fireproof box that you
Right.
keep in the house. So it's now somebody's got to have the key or the code to get into the box, but
Well,
yeah,
and so many
that's
of us don't want to have these conversations because, again, I said morose earlier.
yeah,
Thinking about my death isn't a great date night conversation.
right,
However,
right,
what's way worse is not ever thinking through this and working through it. So it's a real gift to
yeah,
my wife if
yeah,
we've got a living will and an actual will and testament,
yeah,
so that she doesn't have to make those difficult decisions under duress
yeah,
on her
that's
in
right.
her worst season of her life, right?
Yeah, and we've been
God
through it
knows
with
life.
yeah, we've been through it with family members where, there's a reason this person was named to make these decisions, not that person,
Right.
because that person was known to be more emotional and not able to make a clear-headed decision about end of life care.
Yeah.
And I mean, May and I went through it with her dad, where he was struggling with dementia. He did not have long-term memory was completely gone.
Yeah.
And, he was carrying himself with, enormous dignity at a stage of life that most other people would have massively embarrassed themselves. And there'd be a lot of ugly memories associated with that season. But then, he had a DNR, he had a do not intubate, and yet, doctors wanted to intubate because they're,
Gotta
hey,
make that decision before, not
yeah,
in real time.
yeah, we can save a life, we can extend life. We're like, this man has 20 minutes worth of memory. His whole existence is the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And
He
that's it.
knows this,
And
so
if you
he has a
intubate
very
him,
clear path
yeah,
of what he wanted.
yeah.
That makes
And
it
if
easy,
you,
right?
yeah,
Doesn't make it easy, but it
yeah,
makes it easier in an impossible situation.
yeah. And I mean, on a hard note, I mean, against the backdrop of the doctors, I mean, he had the documentation in place. Do not intubate, do not resuscitate. And the doctor still wanted to intubate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had to take the doctor aside and say, look, there's a specific person in this family that's been named to make these decisions, and there's specific documentation in place. Now, if you intubate this man, his body will forget how to breathe.
Yeah.
So as soon as you pull the tube out of him, which you have to do at some point, he will die. So what you set up is a conscious decision where the person who's now tasked with enforcing the do not intubate now has to tell you
Yeah.
detubate him, or whatever that word is, pull the tube on him, extubate, right? And make a conscious decision to kill him, to deprive him of, and so you're setting up, and then that person has to live with that decision. I mean, the long-term implications here are, so you go consciously.
Envision More. Part of Envision More is let's think this stuff through ahead of time.
Let's have this conversation ahead of time. Let's put our instructions in place, and then let's task somebody. And I mean, we have to at some point have a realistic conversation about who are we tasking with? In the same way that we would say, hey, I've got small kids at home. Who do I trust with the kids? Oh, by the way, is the person I trust with the kids the same person I could trust or should trust with the money?
Right.
So, if we're leaving somebody in charge of the money to take care of the kids, but leaving somebody else in charge of the kids because we know that their heart will be for the kids, but maybe they're not capable of making the big financial decisions, and that's okay too. And then, hey, at some point, let's have dinner and introduce those two people and let them know what their respective responsibilities are.
Yeah, that's
right?
good. That's really good.
Well,
as we tie things up here, Wayne, let's we got some extras here in the whether on YouTube or on the podcast stream. We want to make sure that they can get access to a checklist and or resources for, all right, if we're going to have end of life type of conversations, things to be able to work through. There's certainly opportunities there. We'll leave something for GoFundMe there for Maddie Goudreaus' family there. And as well, Giftology certainly want to have access to not only some of the ongoing training there with rich relationships, but also with maybe even the book might be an easy link.
Yeah, those are all really good things. We'll make sure those are in the comments section or the content section of this podcast. So thank you all for being with us today on the Envision More podcast. A bit of a darker topic, a bit more morose, tone today. But these people that we're celebrating, we truly are celebrating. We're celebrating them because they lived well. We're celebrating them because the mission and purpose and values they live by are something for us to emulate and repeat and reflect and magnify in the world, so that we can envision more for ourselves with whatever days that the universe gives us, so that we can magnify impact through the people that we influence and the people that we love. Thanks again for being with me, Trent, and here on the Envision More podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Envision More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. That's Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.